Hello, welcome to video 3 in the series for caregivers, acknowledging and responding to our current state. So nice to see you again. My name is Greg Hungerford and I work for the Special School District, and I'm looking forward to spending time with you today.
Hi again, welcome back. My name is Ryan Guffey and just excited to be here again today and continue to share some thinking and offerings connected to this video series. So since last time, we talked around some things about self-care. We offered this idea of exploring gratitude as a way to take time for yourself and acknowledge the good things that are happening during this time as well. And just want to give you a moment to consider where you've been with those two endeavors. And if you haven't had an opportunity, that's quite all right. Just take a few moments now to consider what you might be grateful for or how you've been taking care of yourself. So even just taking a quick moment like that is an opportunity for self-care. So we'll continue to move on and leave that thinking with you.
You see our supportive framework. We keep coming back to that as a foundation: empathy, awareness, intention, patience, listening. And we began by talking about you and your connections to your own self-regulation. And as a caregiver, you being aware and intentional about if you have patience, if you're listening, that sense of empathy for yourself. And then we move to co-regulation, walking beside your child. And the idea of co-regulation, and that this is not easy, what you're having to do as a caregiver, especially based on the current situation. And how do you walk beside your child, and how do you stay calm and compassionate and patient and listening so that your child can learn from you, and you're modeling, the behaviors and attitudes and emotions that are necessary to navigate this difficult world of us that we have at times. And we did a welcome back, so welcome again. We're going to do a quick review from last time. We think it's always important to kind of go back to think about what we've done, give you a chance to reflect, dive a little bit more into co-regulation, talk about behavior as a communication in its many forms, and then what's next.
So as we consider where we were our last time together, it was this idea of self-care and things that you could do if you had to do 5, 10, maybe even 30 minutes to yourself. So just wanted to get this back in front of you for your consideration, along with a new offering as well. And as we're thinking about and considering this idea of co-regulation, and in the moment, being able to maybe take a step back to take for yourself, or forgiving yourself. Like, I know that I've had opportunities with my kids, and at the end of it, man, I wish I would have, or I could have done that differently. And that is a point of entry of thinking about how we'll move forward in this co-regulation piece. So just another visual to consider around self-care.
And I think about taking a moment for yourself. And when my kids were little, that meant maybe 30 seconds to a minute of me walking out the front door and just stopping for a moment and taking some deep breaths or listening to the birds. And nowadays it's more just taking a step back with my teenagers, and leading to this part of knowing, especially when my brain is becoming dysregulated, and that amygdala, that emotional reactions, that fight, that flight, that freeze, when we're responding to stimuli that is just too much for us in the moment, and how that impacts the hippocampus. Our ability to learn and retain information occurs when our amygdala is under control, and we're using that prefrontal cortex to make decisions, to be regulated as well. And it's a reminder also that when we are dysregulated and our amygdala is firing, and especially for our children and our youth, it's hard to know. It's hard to listen. It's hard to learn. It's hard to follow directions when we're firing from that mid part of the brain. And so just another reminder of paying attention not only to what's going on in your brain, but also what's going on in the brain of your child as well, and how they interplay with each other all day long.
Absolutely. And so it is the idea of what's going on, for us is also going on for our children. And they're a direct reflection of how we're regulating or not regulating. So that sense of connection, and what are we modeling to support them with our own regulation. And we want to come from a place of maybe structuring the environment. What are things that we need to consider to help things in the home run a little bit more smoothly? Is that a daily schedule or agenda that kind of says, hey, this is how we're going to roll today? Providing warmth, responsive relationships. So when we recognize that there is a need of our kids, we can be responsive rather than reactive. That there's some teaching or coaching around self-regulation skills. There's often a saying that we kind of come back to: if kids don't know, then we probably haven't taught them. So what are some skills that we need to provide them to shape? If it's, hey, we both need to take a step back. And we'll get into some of these other skills as we move forward through the day. Want to circle back to what makes co-regulation or even our own regulation so challenging at times. There's a lot going on in our world right now. There was a lot going on in our world before this, and there'll continue to be things that come at us that feed our stress levels that we have to manage. And again, these are just offerings of what may be challenging right now within this current state of stress levels being high, as we think about kind of getting back to some sense of normalcy, or things that we're wanting to do again, whether that be see friends or families, and how that plays out. And so there is some worry. So just a moment to acknowledge that there's still some uncertainty that's fueling or sometimes makes it challenging to support our own and our child's regulation.
And Ryan and I have shared in every video that this is an offering. We don't know what it feels like to be you in your home, facing your specific challenges and the uncertainty, working with your child and youth. And so we continue to offer ideas about what these concepts can look like in action. And so we think about co-regulation and what it looks like and sounds like. I know for me, my tone and volume are key. How do I communicate to my teenagers in a way that's respectful, decent, and sometimes it needs to be a little direct, but can I humanize them while I'm talking to them, and not using a shrieking, angry voice, which we know doesn't work that often. Staying in that moment and just writing out when it maybe perhaps things are starting to get a little charged up, right? And really being present with what's going on, and not trying to latch on to what they did last time or what you think they're going to do in the future. Dealing with each moment in its own situation so that you can really be present. Talking about empathy again, and really taking a second to say, it must be difficult for my child or youth during this situation. Really identifying with their feelings and emotions so that you have a better idea of their regulation level. And we continue to talk about naming and labeling the feeling. Those are cognitive strategies for our prefrontal cortex. When you start saying to yourself, when my teenager does this, it makes me feel this way, I'm going to do this differently. And you start labeling the feeling in your brain and start putting words to it. You're moving away from that mid and back part of the brain to using your prefrontal cortex so that you can respond versus react.
So responding, reacting to sometimes behavior that is challenging, and what might it be communicating? So what is this idea of behavior? Something that we say or that we do. How we do react to our environment. Do we have the ability to stop and pause and consider, or is our initial response when we're unregulated to freeze or fight or flight? So it's how our interplay with what's going on around us. Certainly something that we've learned and how to behave. If it's closing the door behind you when you leave the house, or is it something, take your shoes off when you come into the house? So behavior is something that we've learned. And ultimately coming down to this idea of we engage in behaviors to get or avoid something. So if I act a certain way, then I'll get something that I want. Or maybe sometimes it's avoiding something unpleasant. So if I engage in screaming, I'm kind of connecting to this bottom one. If a behavior is something that I've done and learned for a long time and it works, then I'll probably continue to do it. So if I know that I scream to get something that I want and my caregiver gives it to me quickly rather than asking for it or please or thank you, because that's ultimately from a parent's or a caregiver perspective something that we want, then teaching them how to access that in a way that is appropriate. So just kind of considering as you're thinking about behaviors that you're trying to shape or to teach, what is the behavior communicating? What are they getting from you? Is it attention, or are they avoiding something that's unpleasant, like a chore? So just beginning to consider this idea of behavior and what it might be communicating for you and your child.
And it's not easy. It's not easy to take that step back and say to yourself, my child might be trying to do this because. And so we're going to talk about some examples that maybe we can use in the moment to kind of settle the situation down. And that's offering comfort. Maybe it's a touch on the shoulder, if that's appropriate. You'd be amazed what a smile does when you put a smile on your face in a situation. And again, we have to know your child or youth, but sometimes just a smile and not taking yourself so seriously and just bringing a little levity to a situation, it can just really move things from really overreacting to kind of settling things down a bit. Validation, reassurance. Who doesn't want to be validated? Who doesn't want reassurance, especially during these times? And what are the words or a few sentences that you can say to validate and just reassure? You don't have to write a novel and share a novel here. You use your words wisely. A few well-placed, meaningful words, validation and reassurance can go a long way versus droning on and on, which I like to do over and over again. I'm going to tell you the same thing in 17 different ways until I'm really sure you're listening to me. And so maybe instead of me not talking, it comes to that third bullet, which is I just stop and really listen and allow my child to really share in a safe space and vent. And they're going to know that I'm not going to judge them and I'm not going to start assuming, and I'm going to do my best just to listen. And I've offered a few non-examples of kind of what it doesn't look like. I think anytime we take on a new behavior, it's good to know what it looks like, the examples, but we also have to give ourselves grace and really explore and be curious about what it looks like to us when we're dysregulated, right? For me, I start talking too fast. My voice volume goes up. I start being overreactive. I start sharing too much, saying too much. And so what I want you to think about for you is, what does it look like and sound like to you in your brain, in your body, when you're starting to feel dysregulated? Stomach ache, does your face get red? And so I just stop for a moment for you to think about, what does it look like and sound like to you when you're starting to become dysregulated? And are you aware of that in those signs and signals? And then we continue to come back to not just your example and non-examples, but how about your child and youth, right? What examples do they need? What are the non-examples? What are you seeing from them that are signs to you that your child is starting to become dysregulated and may move to a moment where they're not able to think rationally?
So what's going on for us? What's going on for our children? What's happening with our thinking? What's happening within our body?
So we're going to offer some strategies and tools. We're going to continue to try to be very specific, as again, we offer for you to make applications when you're being a caregiver working with your children and your youth also.
So here we go.
Sample utilizing routine, yield. The concept of neutralize is just take something that perhaps had power and strength and try to reduce it so that it's something that we can change and respond to versus react. Throw a little water on the fire versus putting another match on there. I'm going to continue to encourage you to try. Take a deep breath. Reflect on your emotions. Right now, I'm feeling anger, I'm feeling frustration. And then keeping your youth's best interest. Phrases like, let's try that again. Let's try that in a different way. Let's try to consider other feelings. And I love the idea of let's, because it's not saying you need to, it's saying let's do this together. And that's the key to co-regulation, is that you are walking side by side with your child or youth.
So in this idea of considering others' feelings, so what are some tools that might help us do that? And I want to connect back to our framework that we've offered, this idea of listening and observing intentionally with empathy. And this idea of empathy is being able to take on someone else's perspective. How might they be feeling? What might they be thinking in this given situation? So that idea of trying, okay, I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to consider what's going on around me and my child, and I'm going to proceed with empathy. And in order to do that, I want to offer some sentence structure or some stems of acknowledging. So you're pick an emotion, angry because of blank. And what you want is trying to identify through my observation what might be going on for you, what your behavior might be communicating. And I've noticed as I am able to acknowledge and get the emotion right, that my children will start to kind of ease down. Oh, he is listening to me. Oh, he does get it. Or you can see from my perspective. And if I miss and I don't quite name it, you know what? They'll let me know. And you know what? I also get to try it again. So, you know, thinking about this current state for our kids, and I can only speak for mine, like they're social beings. They want to be out with their friends, and a little reserved around that still. So with my son, I know that you're disappointed because you want to be out of the house and doing the things that you enjoy. And what you really want is to see your friends and have that connection. You've missed that for 2 months. Yes. So how do we go about, you know, creating some structure? So once things are calm, that's when we can move into problem solving. Once things are regulated, we can learn from each other. What might be your needs, kiddo? Here are some of my needs and concerns. How do we kind of come together for a middle ground? So again, these are an offering of how to begin to acknowledge the behavior or the state of that emotion.
We want to pause. We want to pause before we speak. We want to pause after perhaps our childhood use has said something to us. Pausing just creates that gap for you to respond versus react. And really pay attention to your body and your nonverbals and how you're going to say something. Just stopping and thinking and pausing, huge for increasing co-regulation, especially in those moments when perhaps your child or youth says something to you and normally you would react. Try it. Give a nice 20-second to 30-second pause before you say something and see what it does to the situation. And while you're pausing, you can have empathy. Just think to yourself, wow, this is difficult for my child and youth due to these situations. I'm going to take another deep breath too while I'm sitting here pausing. And I'm going to let my child know that I'm taking my time and I'm not going to react to them. And I'm finding that anchor. In this case, it's my breath. The anchor may be that I'm going to turn and just look away and look out the window real quick and see the breeze and see the wind, blowing against a tree. Or maybe I'm going to listen to a sound, and I'm just going to bring myself back and kind of change my thinking away from emotion, again, to a labeling of sort, and anchoring into something that can kind of bring me back. And that's what an anchor does on a boat. When the boat is rocky, the anchor holds it steady. And if worse comes to worse, I might just have to walk away. And for me, sometimes I say that, which is I got to walk away now because this situation isn't working right now. And when I come back, we'll try again. But right now, it's just not working for me. And have a strategy. It's okay to walk away and not get that final word. And you use that courage as a caregiver to show your child and your youth that you can come back again when we're regulated and we'll try this again versus making the situation worse.
Absolutely. The power of the pause, the power of creating some space. And so how might we kind of begin to frame this, these tools, these strategies, this thinking in an intentional way? And I offer this pyramid of influence and this idea too, kind of connecting back to that supportive framework that we're doing pieces with intention. We have a plan, if you will. And so a question might be, what kind of caregiver do I want to be? And so I think about myself in this state is really trying to listen from where my kids are coming from. So I want to pay attention. What do I want to be paying attention to if I want to be a good listener? What will I focus on? Am I talking more than they are? Am I using some empathy stems? Am I asking a lot of questions? Am I pausing? Am I taking a breath before I look to respond after they're speaking just to collect myself? So listening, my intention, my focus, and then what might my actions be? Maybe I do ask an open-ended question, or I look how they're responding to me. What might I see for them? I might see them calming down. I might see them taking a breath. I might see some non, verbals that they're present in with me. Maybe it is a smile. Maybe it is a sigh of relief. Okay, they got it. And where we're kind of moving is this right now is just something to consider, something to think about and kind of play with in your head as you've learned these different strategies throughout today. And then when we come back, we'll do a little review. We'll reflect on some of these pieces, and then we'll take that pyramid of influence, of intention, attention, and action, and really kind of start to consider a thoughtful plan of how you might take in all these learnings from the video series and put something together that might work for you. Again, an offering from Greg and I. And until that time, we sincerely thank you for spending some time with us again, and look forward to seeing you in that next video series.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for all you do as a caregiver. What you do is not easy, but it's so important. And Ryan and I just feel very blessed and fortunate to be able to spend time with you and learn with you as well. We're looking forward to seeing you again soon.
Be well.